Halloween may be over, but there are plenty of scary stories out there about some of our industry's longest tenured brands. But hey, retail buyers, do we have a feel-good story for you? Shake off those October cobwebs with Royal Robins. Yeah, that's right, Royal Robins. If you're like, really? Yeah, really. Royal Robins is one of the true OGs of outdoor brands, part of that early group of California climbers who kind of kicked off the modern era, right alongside Tompkins and Chenard of the North Face in Patagonia. So if anyone can step up, they can. I spoke a bit with Royals brand president Eric Burbank recently, and they're making moves and planning routes. They're focused on natural fibers, tight merchandising, and a range that knows what it stands for. All stuff that Royal himself would be down with too, I bet. I'm hoping to have Eric on the Rock Fight soon so we can dig more into the rise of Royal, and I will say, I've been wearing one of their new wool pieces. It's pretty damn good, guys. So you can meet the Royal Robins team in Kansas City at GOA Connect November 11th to the 14th. Stop by their booth, say hi, maybe throw a few rocks. If you do, just tell them the Colin sent you. Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and today on the show, outdoor industry insider Eoin Comerford returns to weigh in on a few topics that we've been discussing around here recently. But before we get to that, we need you to become the Rock Fight's #1 fan by clicking follow wherever you are listening. And on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on, also hit 5 stars. And if you want to be a real champ, write a review on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to also listen to and follow Gear and Beer, the second podcast on the Rock Fight Podcast Network. And hey, are there more pods coming? If that's the second one, well, stay tuned, because we'll let you know more about that in the coming weeks. But until then, pledge your loyalty to Gear and Beer. Also, if you want to reach out to the show, we encourage you to do so. Send your emails to myrockfight@gmail.com. And all right, let's start the show. Welcome to the Rock Fight, Rock Fight, Rock Fight. Not much to say in my open here today, other than Eoin Comerford is back on the Rock Fight. Eoin's profile has been rising in the industry lately, with lots of in-depth and interesting posts on industry topics on LinkedIn and some opinions he's had published in the Daily. So we were excited to have him come back on and weigh in on the recent run of topics we've been kicking around here on the Rock Fight, things like zombie brands and re-commerce. So stick around, because it's going to get good. Welcome back to the Rock Fight, where today we hear from the Rock Fight's Consigliere and industry insider, Eoin Comerford. All right, Eoin Comerford, the Rock Fight's official outdoor industry what are we calling you? We need to call you something, because you're now on the show enough that we feel like there's what is it? Consigliere?
I like Consigliere, yeah. Industry Consigliere, absolutely.
I dig
You're
that.
our Robert Duvall. That's
Yep.
what's someone bring in Comerford.
Right. That's right. I love that.
How you doing, man?
I'm great. Well, it's we're recording this the day after the election, so we'll say I'm surviving.
Did something happen?
I don't know. It was a thing. Something. It was all over the news, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the end. So the last few weeks have been interesting, and you've been posting about some things that we've been talking about on the show, and we've been talking a lot about what we've been kind of, titled zombie brands, right? And it's the notion that they're these once relevant brands that still exist, but are a shadow of what they once were. We've seen the poor states of brands like Marmot and Prana over the last few weeks, and the common theme throughout all of it that we've identified, I think you have as well, is the sort of poor stewardship by big corporate owners. Now, you have a kind of interesting position here, because you came into the industry by joining a, quote unquote, relatively small retailer that was also one with had a really strong brand in Moose Jaw, right? I mean, I remember in my past industry career, Moose Jaw was just kind of one of those dealers that you want to be in because the brand had a presence as a retailer. But then you also have the experience of staying with that brand through some big corporate ownership. So let's just start with it. Given your experience on this front, what are some of your observations when you see a brand like a Marmot or some of these other ones that at one time had significant clout, but now sort of appearing as a shell of its former self?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why these things don't work out a lot. One is, typically the founder or the person who really built the company up until it was acquired exit stage left, and so you lose a lot of that, which thankfully wasn't the case with the Moose Jaw team. We were very much intact after we were acquired, but that really does create a bit of that linkage to the past and to the brand and to the authenticity can get a little bit lost. And so the corporate overlord will bring in either somebody from their team, which is usually awful, or the quote unquote industry professional, that sort of 50 something white
Yes.
male that, it kind of bounces from company to company. I mean, we are in an incredibly incestuous industry. It's like where the same people keep popping up at different brands. But that's not to say that those are bad folks, but they kind of get in the same playbook and just aren't connected to the brand itself. And then they're put under typically very specific edicts and bonus structures, right? They've got a pretty big bonus, and it's all linked to sales and margin, right? That's the whole
Yep.
deal. And so you start really getting forced, I guess, into making decisions that are very short-sighted, right? I mean, you're just chasing the number. And if you're chasing growth, you've got a few options, right? You can either sell more to your existing customers, so you start shoving it down everyone's throat. Oh, an extra preseason discount if you increase your buy by 20% year over year, and yada yada, and that whole thing starts, right? Or you sell more things. So you decide, hey, yeah, okay, yeah, we make these hiking backpacks, but we're going to make panniers and messengers and all these other things, and shoes. Everyone should make shoes, and so you start to expand maybe beyond your core. Or, and this happens even worse, is like we're going to sell to more people. So, okay,
Mm-hmm.
independent specialty, that's a lot of work, with a lot of small players. Let's sell to the big guys. Let's start to sell to sporting goods and off price and all these other places. And I think Marmot basically did all of those things
Yeah.
at some point. They denied some of it, but come on. I mean, them show like the precip was the great example, right? I mean, this was sort of their flagship product, and they're like, how do we make even more money on this? I know. We'll knock off our own product, name it something else, sell it to Sierra, and they can sell it for 20% under what we're selling it at regular retail. Brilliant idea. I mean, but that's what happens when you've got no connection to the past and all you think about are the numbers.
It's just the disease of more, right? It just continues. I mean, you don't get sold unless somebody sees financial upside, because otherwise, why are they buying you? And because it's not to say that these owners, I guess, couldn't retain that authenticity, but to your point, there's not that emotional attachment to it. There's not that thing, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. It's just like, how do we grow, and just push, and at some point, I mean, it works out, I guess, in some regards when you have like a North Face or a Patagonia, but it seems like those examples are fewer and far between versus the ones who get acquired and then just kind of lose their fastball along the way.
Yeah, I mean, even like you look at Mountain Hardware is a great example, right? So Mountain Hardware was actually acquired by Columbia. I didn't realize this until I was chatting with somebody who was in the business a couple of days ago. They were acquired in 2003,
Yeah,
right?
it was a
And
while ago.
so early days, the first like 10-ish years of that, Columbia basically left them alone. And they did really well. I mean, they were, I know from Moose Jaw, they were like a top 5 brand for us. I mean,
Yeah.
they kind of had a core, they had kind of a cool factor, and there was a definite niche, a higher end brand. And then I don't know if sales started to decline or what exactly happened internally, but Columbia started to get way more involved. And I think somebody at Columbia had this genius idea. Hey, listen, you know what we could do? We could take our Columbia jackets, right, with our own internal, fabrications and, 2.5
Omni-heat,
layer technology, right? Whatever, yeah,
omni-cold.
omni-heat, exactly. And we'll just change the brand name. We'll double the price. Consumers will eat this shit up. Q Dry or whatever it was called, right?
Yep.
Get rid of
I
all
think
that
so.
Gore-Tex crap. Who needs that?
Yeah.
And it was just like it's like they turned off the switch. I mean, we just saw that brand just go successively down, 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 down. I mean, for years, it was down 20% a year for
Well, and they
years.
decontented stuff too. Even like the fleece programs, they would start using cheaper stuff. I mean, yeah, the early
Right.
kind of 20 teens, mid 2010s were rough times for Mountain Hardware. I mean, they were definitely, if we did this episode a year ago, I'd be talking about them in the same way we talked about Marmot. And I think and we're going to talk a little bit more about Columbia in a minute, but to credit to them that they sort of let them in this last year feel like really reestablish themselves about what makes their brand interesting.
Right. And they allowed them to to, it's not all about Gore-Tex necessarily, but they allowed them to go outside of the Columbia family and
Right.
make the best product out there with the best possible ingredient materials, et cetera. And the consumer is responding, right? I mean, it's working. So, yeah, having a hands-off approach, I think, is key. But the problem, and I think what with most corporate folks, they'll say going in, oh, we want to be hands off, right? And typically, as long as you're hitting your numbers, they'll stay hands off. But as soon as
Right.
things start to get rough, then it's like, okay, now
Don't maybe come back there, kids.
yeah, we got to bring in somebody else who's going to get us our 15% a year.
We got this guy from Amazon just itching to get his hands on you.
Oh yeah, this guy came out of Quaker Oats. Really knows consumer is really going to come in here and blow it up for us.
He sold to Ralph's, so we think he'll do okay with REI. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
What do you think happened with Vasque? Because we've talked about Vasque, but Vasque was one where I remember when Dave and I first saw the story, we were chatting a bit about it and kind of almost assuming that Red Wing had acquired them and kind of had this similar thing that we're talking about. But no, they were with Red Wing the entire time. They just never really managed that brand well, even though they had sort of one of those iconic products in the Sundowner.
I think Vasque is it's a similar story with like Eureka versus Jetboil, Sierra versus Kelty. In these sort of family of brands approaches, I think what can happen is when you have one brand that's doing well, or like Red Wing itself really sort of took off a number of years ago and kind of has it's always been a great brand, but it went beyond just a work boot to kind of a cool hip happening.
Yeah, the whole hipster phenomenon. That's partly
right.
Dave's fault. It was a Northwest thing.
It's debatable.
There are hipsters that would disagree with you. But
they would have called them the Georgia boot that then got turned into Skechers before all of that. But you're right. They got they got some of the table scraps of that movement, right?
I've offended Danner with my how dare I.
Danner's
the one who really capitalized, but that was many years later. For sure.
But
sorry.
But that's okay. But we start talking footwear, and Dave just can't contain himself.
These deep cuts.
But the point is just that in those sorts of scenarios, though, in a company that maybe has some limited investment dollars, the dollars tend to follow the success, and so with Red Wing doing well, and so they want to lean in there, and it's not that they necessarily say we're going to lean out of Vasque or we're going to lean into Jetboil and forget about Eureka, but it can kind of become that because they get all the best people want to work on that brand, the dollars go there, and I think these other brands get a little bit forgotten or become sort of redheaded stepchildren, and you see what happens along the way.
Also, too, though, in terms of an organization like a Red Wing, and the reason I kind of popped up there is because, they were the 100-year overnight success in terms of that hipster. They never marketed in that way. They've never marketed in any way.
Right.
So, and that's the ingredient that Vasque needed to help consolidate and propel and leverage that, especially that 90s trend. Right. They were never able to move to marketer and demand generator because their organization was never, in my mind, was never set up for it. They never had to. Right. They had a position, a market position almost to themselves. Or work was just kind of its own thing anyway. Right.
Wouldn't you think that would be beneficial to Vasque then? That they would just kind of like, hey, we got this cool
until you want to grow,
and leave it alone.
It's all great until you want to grow. But look, even those trend, like, oh, they adopted us. You still need to. Timberland didn't just do nothing and allow the wheat boot. Oh my gosh, everybody's buying the wheat boot. That may have started it, but it certainly takes some energy and thought to maximize it.
Same thing with Doc Martens back in the day. I mean, that boot was actually developed not to be a hip punk rocker boot from the 70s. It was really initially developed for it was more of a medical application, medical and workwear application.
It was, and then moving into that, it's funny you talk about footwear. Actually, was part of the launch of Dr. Martens Industrial in the late 90s, early 2000s. So bringing that boot to the work market. Right. And it's the same idea. You had this massive brand awareness and even the space, but still you had to market and build the credibility. You had to build the contacts with the the jobbers in terms of who's hiring and all of the kind of form. I'm missing the word of the catalog consolidators that you had to buy your work boots from, making sure that you're getting all
Mm.
Yeah, the
certified.
Grangers of the world and those
Yeah,
guys.
exactly. So that's a marketing task, right, in terms of bringing all that together. But yeah,
Nothing
comparable story.
you can say what you want about the yellow boot and the urban crowd, or even like the sundowner with like the college kids. There's been no better match than the Dr. Martin and the punk rock scene. Sorry, it's the
Right.
best thing of all time. It
Right.
just and it
Well,
persists to this day.
And in the '90s,
I
what
had my docs back in the day.
Yeah, but they were
I need to see you in a
they were
paradigm.
hesitant to use that, right? Even because back in the they had a department store business, they were making sandals,
But even their
junior
logo
high.
like matches kind of the punk rock vibe.
Well,
I mean, it's just
it's kind of like Vans when they realized, wait a minute,
Vans
this
is
is
probably
our
the good
subculture. Let's
Right.
own that piece,
Yeah.
and mainstream growth will grow out of that.
Well, so you look think about opportunities that came out of that, right? So, because as things evolve, it just does open up opportunities, and so you talk to some specialty shops about old guard, using air quotes, outdoor brands that are meaningful still today in terms of like, important that they have them, that they sell a lot of that stuff, but they also seem very vulnerable, like the North Faces and the Patagonias. They're still a pretty high percentage. And talking to some folks like a friend of the show, Wes Allen, or Todd Frank up at the Trail House. But everyone seems like they're very open to something else as well, right? So, I mean, do you think we're at the beginning, Owen, of a run of interesting new outdoor brands? Are we kind of at heyday of like outdoor 2.0? Like, where do you think we are when it comes to in the branding scene these days?
I think we could be. I mean, I work with a ton of emerging brands that are coming up with some really, really fun stuff. Some of which have been actually on your show, and soon will be. But I think, unfortunately, our industry dynamic is not set up to make that happen, right? Because
Yeah.
all these brands are trying to break into wholesale or specialty, and the rep environment, and I'm not knocking reps. Let me just preface this. I'm not knocking reps, but the rep environment is not one that is just built for newness and for new brand launches, right? Because I mean, ultimately reps, and I'm not blaming them for this. They got to put food on the table, right? But they have their kind of golden goose brands, and they're the ones that they want to spend their time and effort on, and okay, maybe they're only making a 5% commission on whatever, Nemo or, Osprey or what have you. And okay, so maybe they're getting 8 or 10% from this new brand, but 10% of nothing is still nothing, right? And so, it's like, even if they're repping a brand, and, I was talking to one rep, he said, yeah, it's one thing to sign up a rep, or for a rep to sign on a brand, but do they get out of the bag? And I'm like, what does that mean? And it's like, well, what it means is, I go into I've got X amount of time with a buyer at a certain store, right? And so I'm going to start with the big brand. I'm going to start with whatever, the Osprey, the Nemo, the North, whatever it is,
Yep.
right? I'm going to start there. And then if things are going well, I'm probably just going to keep with that. If I'm getting my buy, getting my numbers in, I'm going to do that. And at the end of the time, if I've got time left, maybe and hey, have you seen new brand, right? And bring that out of the bag. For a lot of reps, maybe that brand never makes it out of the bag, and so it's just tough. And then the other thing also is sort of the whole kind of category exclusivity thing. So you're some brand that has a new apparel brand or a new pants brand or whatever, and chances are that reps already have a pants brand, and are they going to give up Prana to pick up Lives In or whatever? Yeah, probably not.
Maybe.
So our industry is just not set up. And then we used to have, trade shows where these brands could, overpay for a booth, and they could, hopefully get in front of a whole bunch of buyers. That's not really happening anymore in an effective way. And now I've talked a lot with Sean Smith over at OR, and they're trying to lean into that, which I think is
Yeah,
cool.
the emerging brands.
Will that be successful? Yeah, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, this next year is gonna be interesting for that scene. I'll beat up on the reps, and I'll beat up on the brands too. As a former sales manager, I think some of the problems you're describing are age old problems. As someone like when I was managing even a Goo, when I was a sales manager there for a little while, where pretty well established brand, but to your point, if you have Asics, are you how long are you spending on Goo? So, but then that was
Right.
my challenge as a sales manager is like, how do I create programs? How do I create ways to help the sales reps understand my role will never be more than as a B plus brand for those reps, right? So the brand I think needs to play a role with when it comes to that. But then also there was always a gap between the really good reps and then the sort of, no offense, reps who are listening, the C-level, D-level reps who, it was always easy to get a brand to, they would always take a brand on. And the good reps to me were the ones who would make that time, even if it was like, I'm at ProBar, I'm at Goo. Hey, I just got through my ASICs presentation. Hey, here's a sample. We got a program running on. I'll follow up with an email. And they would follow up with the email. But now this is, 10 plus years ago that I was doing this. And you talk to reps today, and the really good reps today, they have EDI, they process orders. There's a whole other level that some of these really good sales agencies have gone to that make it next to impossible for even some C plus B minus agencies to match. And so, to your point, if I'm a emerging brand, I think you mentioned this on something you wrote for the Daily. The innovation's coming from the people who are kind of just doing it on their own, right? It's the Vuaris and those kinds of the Ons. Those are the brands you've seen grow, who have kind of pioneered their own brands and their own points of distribution and things like that. But I still wonder if a good idea, a good product, a good brand can sometimes get past some of the bullshit and find traction, even if there's a lot of roadblocks in the way. So I don't know. I think you're probably right with your answer of like, it could be. We'll see where we are. I think it all depends on the brands and what the retail response is to those brands ultimately.
Hopefully the good brands will break through. I mean, you had Scenic on the pod last week. There's a brand that is doing some different stuff, and we need different, right? We need,
Have to have it.
I think I was, so actually I was at an investor conference where Scenic presented, right? And we had some sort of old. It was an outdoor investor conference, so we had some old guard folks, and we had after they presented, everyone presented. We kind of did a little debrief with all the investors about the different companies, and the comment from one guy was about the Scenic hiking pants. Like, I mean, those don't look like any hiking pants I've ever seen. And
Like, great sales pitch.
And right, my answer was, that's the whole effing
It's a bumper
point.
sticker.
Yeah, it's like, dude, we need different. We need new and innovation and excitement.
Yeah, and what's cool about that brand too is like, and one reason we chose to have them on, even though we don't feature like a lot of brand stories, was you get the pitches you hear. I think we first heard about them probably at Outdoor Market Alliance. The CGPR's pitching them, and you hear like, oh, we have a new outdoor apparel brand, and of course Dave and I both textile backgrounds. Are like, all right, God, Jesus Christ, another one, right? Like, but then the moment I saw a picture of it, I'm like, oh. Just even for the color, even if nothing else was different, like that's a bold choice. And then you peel it back a little bit, you're like, oh, all right, this is very cool what they're doing.
Right. Well, I think that speaks to, while our industries, like you said, the gate is getting narrower and narrower in terms of getting into our traditional retail. There are more opportunities for a brand to distinguish itself and establish itself through the D2C, through other mechanisms. And at the end of the day, it's still that innovation piece that's distinguish. Why am I different? Still
Totally.
wins. Right. I mean, you look at Vuori and On. I mean, those are they created something that attracted massive amounts of money. Okay. So they have purchased their way in,
It's its own form of innovation.
not waiting for the sales agencies to catch up, right? They powered their way through, but it was because they had other avenues to build that before they were able to kind of force their way into the party.
Yeah, but it's super hard to be a profitable brand if you're D2C only. It just with the costs of Meta and everything else along the way, you have to have wholesale, you have to have omnichannel if you're going to win. And so, unfortunately, some brands are just going to run out of steam before they get that wholesale piece. Because the two just go hand in hand. But yeah, absolutely.
I think that's an underappreciated reality, is the cost of business doing D2C. We see the upset, we see the massive numbers that are potential. You see the margin that you get to keep. Oh my gosh.
You'd think everyone would know by now, right? I mean, it's been so well covered, right? About like, hey, it's not what you think
Colin,
it is.
when you have your investor conference talking about, that being different in a negative light, there you go.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And fundraising is tough out there for outdoor brands. It really is, because, like the VC thing doesn't exist for outdoor, because VCs, they want the next $1 billion thing. Right.
Yeah.
And let's face it, there's not a lot of $1 billion outdoor brands. I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of $20 million outdoor brands that are household names,
Right.
from a volume perspective. So it requires a different sort of funding, source of funding. Yeah. So, but there's a lot of really cool brands out there if retailers are willing to look and give them a shot. And from what we've seen, if they don't just shove them away in the corner, if they really do, take a chance with some brands and create some interest and innovation, I think it helps everybody. It helps them. It gets them new customers in the door. It gets some engagement and some excitement.
Oh, and how does a brand that's maybe got some traction going, how do they find their way to outdoor investment? Like what's the path to do that?
It's tough. I mean, usually brands as they're starting up, they'll start out with like a friends and family round, right? And so they'll get some dollars that way, and then they'll try to go the angel route. And there are some angel investment groups that are out there, or individual angel investors that have a little bit of cash, maybe they came out of the industry or just have a love for the outdoors that wants to be involved with an outdoor brand, and you can raise some money that way. And then beyond that, a lot of it is actually some of the best options are more with friends and family offices of of folks that came out of the outdoors, like the Cliff Bar folks, or what have you, who made their dollars in the outdoors and still want to be involved with that area of business.
So you also, last thing I want to talk about in this part of the conversation before we move into something else is you posted on LinkedIn about an opportunity you see for a brand like Columbia. Like I said, we come back to Columbia. So what is it about Columbia that makes you think they could overcome what has kind of held back other big outdoor brands as they look to reset creatively? Because Dave and I talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago, I think, on the moves they're making on the creative front and the upside they see with their brand. I'm, again, someone who's been doing in this world for a while, it's tough for me to see as Columbia anything other than Columbia. You know what I mean? So
Right.
why did you want to take a moment to kind of pause and be like, actually, there could be something here?
I think the first thing is they're actually recognizing a problem that most brands are ignoring, which is the fact that we're doing a really shitty job of bringing young people into the outdoor industry, right? And we're at a risk of kind of aging out. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at the outdoor participation report that OAA brought out. What it's showing is, there's more people in the outdoors, but the core group are participating less. And I think they're participating less because, the knees are gone, the hips are gone. I mean, they're just getting old. And the average age of an REI member has got to be north of 50 at this point. I mean, it's not great. And so we need to bring young people into the space. But part of the challenge is the fact that um, we've got you know, first of all, income inequality is crazy, right? I mean, just the affordability of
Sure. Yeah.
housing and food and all these other things, and it hasn't kept up for the younger generation, so they can't afford a lot of the stuff that we're producing in the outdoor industry. Which, oh, by the way, is getting more and more expensive. I wrote this article in the Daily about it, where we've seen 20% inflation on average in the industry over the last 3 or 4 years.
Mm.
So what was already sort of expensive is getting even more expensive, and you get these people into the outdoors, all these participants who probably, like, if you got into camping during COVID, yeah, maybe there were some people that were out there buying, some high end tents, but a lot of folks were at Walmart or Dick's, buying
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever the $100, 6-person tent is, right? They want to move up to a 6-person, or even a 4-man from a an outdoor brand. They're looking at 3, 4, 5 times the price, right?
Yeah.
So that's not to say that product isn't worth it, but it's a big step up. So I think Columbia, they've recognized the issue. um, B, they're more at the value end of the spectrum, which I think will help them with that younger generation. So we're not asking somebody, this isn't like Arc'teryx saying, "Hey, we're going to go after the young people," and see if we can have them step up to a $600 shell. I love Arc'teryx, by the way, but they wouldn't be the brand I would think here. So I think Columbia has a play. That said, I mean, the corporate world is strewn with brands that decided to go young, and it doesn't always go well. We'll just put it that way.
Well, I would just ask, how does this differ from the last announcement from Columbia with their last creative agency, which had the mandate to go younger and level set the brand. They returned the Gert Boyle campaign. They celebrated their regionalism. They put popular music into their videos. It just seems like this is just next
The
group
next thing.
up on
It's time.
the same mission. And
this
will
time
they
in the
allow
cycle.
them? Will they allow them to do that? What's necessary?
Well, I think that's the real question, right? And I think that's the really tough part with any of these things is, you bring in this young hip creative agency. Oh, by the way, it's called Adam and Eve, DDB. By the way, if you look at adamandeve.com in the US,
Don't do that.
just if you go to that site, maybe just word to the wise.
I mean,
that
you could do it, but you might need to make a few
like, wow, they're
purchases
getting
before you go.
super edgy. This is So to those that on the pod that don't know, Adam and Eve is actually in the US is a sex toy site. So obviously, I had no idea about that until I went to the site.
Right.
But the
You kept having to clear your bookmarks and cookies to go to the other one.
not at all. But yeah, so I'm like, wow, are they going to have some kind of PFAS-free latex bodysuit happening here? Well, what?
I think you're
It
onto
would be
something.
an interesting.
Yeah,
It would be an
actually,
interesting collab.
Dave, there's your answer. That's how they're going to be different this time.
I'm writing that down. Right.
So they've got the hip young agency, right? They bring in this guy, Matt Sutton from Facebook, etc. The tough part in all these things is usually the agency is going to come up with some really great stuff. No doubt about that, right? But is the 50-year-old white guy going to know enough to be able to say, hey, that actually is cool and fits the brand? Or I know I know I don't get it, but I think it could work. It's the whole buyer versus creative thing that's fraught with challenges.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, but I would say that, Tim Boyle pointed out in the announcement that they're doing really well in Europe. And so I actually talked with some of the folks in Europe and looked at what they're doing over there. And it is interesting. They're taking a bit of a different approach. They've got something called Hike Society, and they're really leaning into hike as their core brand identity and organizing regional hikes everywhere, getting out there, working with local folks, content creators, associations, and really just trying to make hike the core. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
We believe in the sock to make you happy. We believe in the sock, home for comfort. We believe in the sock, you don't have to bust, blister, or fall. We believe in free range toes and having room to roam and fine gauge merino wool is comfortable as home. We believe in made in USA, and we believe in doing what we say. Where fits, we fit, that's right. Where fits, we fit, that's right. And we believe in the sock, fits. We believe in the sock, fits.
That was Fitz Socks coming in hot, or at least thermo-regulated. They're bringing a fresh new sock sound to 2025. If you don't know Fitz, you should. They're the even smarter merino performance brand with patented technology that does what it says it does. It fits. Whole foot comfort, baby. Check Fitz out on tour from November 11th to the 14th in Kansas City at GOA Connect. If you don't have an appointment, go by their booth and say hi. Who knows? You may run into Travis and Taylor just hanging out and talking socks. And now, back to the show. All right, so you also had a piece published in the Daily about the upside of secondhand, right? And we've obviously talked a lot on the show about used gear and the impact it can have. And the day before this conversation, I recorded another sit-down with Aaron Provine from Gear Trade that will come out next week. And in that conversation, I remarked that how that wasn't that long ago where it felt like folks like Aaron and entities like Gear Trade were sort of almost like pulling us towards secondhand. And I really does feel like that has now sort of shifted to more of a push towards secondhand. What is the opportunity that you're recognizing in the used or secondhand marketplace?
So I see used as a key part of the answer to the affordability issue within the outdoor industry. And it is a way to get really great outdoor gear in the hands of some of the younger folks, or maybe people who couldn't quite step up to the new stuff. And over time, those people, some will stick with used, some won't, but some will move up and they'll start to buy the new product, right? Like talking with Todd Frank from Trailhead when we were at the Outdoor Media Summit, he has a consignment business. It's over 20% of his sales is this used gear store. But his comment was, I'm seeing a whole new customer come in, college kids, moms with young kids, all of these folks that would never come into the store before or felt that it wasn't for them, just from a price and everything perspective. They're coming in, they're trying stuff out. Or, a guy who would always, complain about the price of merino, picks up an icebreaker shirt, and the next thing is he's back in the store and he's just spending $400 to go head to toe in merino, right? So I just think used gear today in the industry is being mishandled. Brands are looking at used gear through the lens of a liability, right? It's like, oh, we got this used gear. What are these returns? What are you going to do with this stuff? Or they're looking at it through the lens of some kind of sustainability cred, right? So we want to make sure that we've got the checkbox, that we've got our little circularity thing done. And so we're going to announce this, bespoke, gate kept used gear program. And it's they're doing it all wrong, because they're not moving the product. Like most of these brands, if you actually talk to them, they're like, yeah, we've got a shit ton of this stuff because nobody's buying it from us. And I'll tell you why nobody's buying it from you, because you don't have used gear customers. You spend all of your time and effort trying to attract new customers, right? That's all the targeting through Google and Meta and everything else is who is going to come in and buy new product, right? When they land on your website or on your PDP or whatever, they've already decided that they're probably going to buy a new whatever, right? And so even if you did give them the used option at that point, they're probably not going to take it. And by the way, most sites don't. It's hidden away in some corner so that they can say it exists, but it really isn't a key part of what they want to do. And they're deathly afraid that, oh my gosh, if we sell somebody a used thing, they won't buy the new one that's also clogging up the warehouse.
Yeah, they become marketing for the new stuff. That's all it is.
Right. And so they're thinking about it all wrong. And so it should be like let's treat used as an asset. Let's get it into the hands of the people that actually have used customers. That would be the gear trades of the world, like Aaron, right? That would be the trailheads of the world, right? Get it into those people's hands. Every brand out there has like an off-price person, right? And they're responsible for selling all of the discontinued merch to whatever, to hopefully mostly their retail partners, but probably Sierra. But okay, hey, have that person also be in charge of selling your returns and your used gear stuff. It's at an even deeper discount, but you're getting it out there, you're getting it into the market, you're kind of helping everybody in the process.
Yeah.
And I think you're helping yourself in the process as well, because you're getting people into your brand. And so that's kind of how
that's what we talked about a bit with Aaron, not to spoil the conversation that's coming next week, but the one thing I pointed out is exactly what you're saying about a lot of these things. They build a separate website for it. It's a separate thing, and it doesn't mean anything. Then Aaron talks a lot about how they're partnering with Jones and Flylow and how they're approaching it a different way. Flylow, it's not just send us only Flylow bibs, like you can send them any bib, right? Jones is. And if you go to Jones's website, they are definitely doing it differently, where it's a big tile on their front page of their website about their used program. And you can send them any snowboard and it'll get repurposed into a new snowboard. I think the thing that I've definitely learned, and Dave and I had that conversation with Sophie Benson not that long ago, who's an environmental fashion journalist. When you put what we are doing in the outdoor space against the larger fashion world, like we truly are doing some pretty interesting and innovative things. But it always, and I think everything it comes back to is, can secondhand reach its potential as long as brands are chasing growth at all costs? And if it truly is if it is for some of these brands, and I know I'm overly cynical on this topic, but some of them, they are absolutely just checking the box to say they had it. Now, frankly, I'll throw Patagonia into that conversation. I think they have to be mentioned just because Wornwear has been around the longest and it's still less than 1% of their sales. And at some point, you have to ask, well, what are you doing with this? Now, you might percentage-wise, they're a bigger brand. They might have more on there. They might sell more. But you'd think, given who Patagonia is, they'd want that to be a much more meaningful part of their business. And so while I really do applaud the industry as a whole, that we're doing things differently than a lot of other spaces, there's still definitely some things that are tripping us up, it feels like, along the way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, brands just want to gatekeep this stuff, and I just don't think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, we've got some circularity legislation coming down the pipe. We've got stuff happening in California, um, stuff happening in Europe. There's nothing will ever happen nationally in the U.S., obviously, but state by state, we're going to see, I think, more of those sorts of things happening, to where brands are just going to have to come up with real solutions and not just the use gear tab.
Yeah.
I think you said something that's interesting, though, in terms of the targeting aspect. It really does mean, though, that if they reallocating part of that budget, reallocating those consumer profiles of who really you're going after, that's kind of that work that's going to happen, just even in that digital space, to make a meaningful difference.
But even if, let's say, even if you do start to target use, part of the challenge with use is that it's so hit or miss from a consumer's buying perspective,
Right.
that like, if you're taking just this brand only store look, it's just a really tough buying experience, because you're going on there and you're like, I want a shell, I want a Gore-Tex shell, I'm a size, men's medium, whatever. If you're just going on the brand site to get that, like, the chance of getting exactly what you want, pretty low. This is just not a great experience. Whereas if you go to your local gear store, to a gear trade, whatever, suddenly you've got options, right? There will be a men's medium Gore-Tex
Right.
shell out there, and now you've got
Right.
options, and you can choose the right one, right? So that's why this whole bespoke brand site thing just doesn't really work.
Yeah, and I think and again, like, that's to tease the thing that's coming a week from now, but like that's something that Aaron mentioned as well. It's like, listen, this is what we do. Like, this is, what our model is. We don't bring in closeouts. This is something that we can do things that other folks can't, because it's a big part of what gear trade is. So if you like this part of our conversation, come back next week to hear that as well. Sorry, Dave, did you have
Cool.
another follow up? Sorry.
That's good.
Okay. Well, I think it's the last thing, like we mentioned at the top, it's the day after the election, and it kind of hit you up to see if you wanted to weigh in on this a little bit. I mean, it's obviously it's still kind of raw out there, but as we start looking at how the outdoor industry should be approaching a second Trump presidency, it's what I figured want to give you the floor and get your thoughts on what you think that should look like.
Yeah, I mean, I just think back to my personal experience with the last Trump presidency, 2016. Well, first of all, from a sales perspective, the outdoor buyer was in mourning for like 2 weeks at least afterwards. And we at Moose Jaw saw a definite lack of sales. So I think that was an interesting time. But me personally, I mean, I would say I wallowed in it. Like, I was just all the indignation. Like, I was never a news program type person, but I was, in the CNN, MSNBC, just echo chamber, just soaking up the negativity. And ultimately, sort of, I don't know how many months in, or I'm like, this is just not healthy. This is not. I'm not doing it, because at my heart, I am a pragmatist, right? It's like, control what you can control, right?
Yeah.
Figure out where you can make an impact. And I realized this is just not helping anybody. So I think the industry kind of has to do sort of a similar thing, which is, because one of the things with Trump is that he is great at the misdirect, right? It's like, you know, here's all these crazy things, like, that maybe from a progressive perspective he's saying, and it's way too easy just to get sucked into that conversation and just sucked into the indignation and reaction and all that stuff. It's like, guess what? That's not doing anything. You're actually playing into the game when you just react and take the bait, and waste all your energy on that stuff. We, as an industry, if you're about conservation, if you're about inclusivity, we as an industry need to basically shut that out, ignore that, and get to doing the hard work, right? And that hard work has never been needed more than really getting behind things such as sustainability, conservation, inclusivity and working with the grassroots folks that are still there. They're getting up today. They've got the same work to do, maybe a slightly bigger hill to climb. They just need more help. And so we just need to, ignore the bullshit and keep on going.
I think we could wrap it up there, man. That's good advice. Hopefully everybody takes it. The consigliere of the rock fight, Eoin Comerford, back again. Thanks for
All
coming
right.
on, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's the show for today. What are your thoughts on what you just heard? Send your feedback to myrockfight@gmail.com. The Rock Fight is a production of Rockfight LLC. Our producer today was David Karstad. Art direction provided by Sarah, the Avenging Angel Gensert. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. And once again, we are going to have our guy, Chris DeMakes, take us out with the Rock Fight fight song. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.
Rock fight.